My daughter spent my $100,000 in savings. She didn't know about the vault in my name, and perhaps she never imagined that her own mother could outsmart her so completely. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. I sit here in my small apartment in Queens, New York, watching the morning light filter through curtains that have seen better days. The sound of traffic on Northern Boulevard mingles with the distant rumble of the number 7 train, creating that familiar urban symphony that has been the soundtrack to my life for the past 43 years. My hands, weathered from decades of work, rest on the kitchen table where I eat most of my meals alone now. The silence in this apartment has become so thick I could cut it with a knife. This morning, like every morning for the past 6 months, I reached for my phone hoping to see a message from Sarah, my daughter. Nothing. The screen stares back at me, cold and empty, just like my bank account after she drained every penny I had saved over 30 years of working double shifts. I remember the exact moment my world collapsed. It was a Tuesday in March, around 3 in the afternoon. I had just finished my shift at the local grocery store where I work part-time to supplement my Social Security. At 72, I never thought I'd still be working, but life has a way of surprising you in the cruelest ways. I was checking my balance at the ATM outside Chase Bank on Roosevelt Avenue, expecting to see that familiar number, $100,437.62. Instead, the receipt showed $12.18. My legs nearly gave out right there on the sidewalk. People rushed past me, immersed in their own lives, their own problems, while my entire world crumbled in my shaking hands. The sounds of the city became muffled, as if I were underwater. The smell of hot dogs from the vendor on the corner turned my stomach. I gripped the metal railing of the bank's entrance and tried to breathe. How could this happen? I had been so careful with my money, so meticulous about every transaction. I lived on less than $1,500 a month, clipping coupons, buying generic brands, wearing the same coat for 8 winters. Every dollar I managed to save went into that account, building slowly but surely towards some semblance of security in my old age. The bank teller, a young woman with kind eyes but tired shoulders, pulled up my account history on her computer screen. Her expression changed as she scrolled through the transactions. 3 large withdrawals over the past 2 weeks, each one accompanied by a signature I recognized all too well. Sarah's signature. My own daughter had systematically emptied my life savings. I walked home that day in a daze, my feet carrying me automatically through the familiar streets of Elmhurst. The cherry blossoms were blooming along Queens Boulevard, their delicate pink petals dancing in the spring breeze. Such beauty in the world, yet I felt nothing but hollow darkness inside. How had I been so naive? How had I trusted so blindly? The apartment felt different when I returned, smaller somehow, as if the walls had moved closer together. I sat in my favorite chair by the window and stared at the framed photographs on the side table. Sarah, at 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, clutching a dandelion she had picked for me from the park. Sarah, at 18, radiant in her graduation cap and gown, her arms wrapped around me as we celebrated her acceptance to college. Sarah, at 25, holding my first grandchild, little Emma, both of them glowing with hope and promise. When had things changed? When had my little girl, the daughter I would have died for, become someone who could steal from her own mother without a second thought? The memories came flooding back then, each one a fresh stab of pain in my chest. All those years of sacrifice, all those dreams I had postponed or abandoned entirely, all for the sake of giving my children a better life than I had known. I was 19 when I married Robert, Sarah's father. We were so young, so full of plans and dreams. He worked construction, I worked as a secretary, and together we scraped by in a 1-bedroom apartment in Astoria. When Sarah was born 2 years later, followed by her brother Michael 3 years after that, our little apartment overflowed with love and laughter, even if it was cramped and we counted every penny twice. Robert died when Sarah was 16 and Michael was 13. A heart attack at 45. Sudden and devastating. I remember standing in that hospital corridor, still in my work uniform from the office, holding his wedding ring in my palm while the doctor explained that there had been nothing they could do. In that moment, I became a widow and a single mother overnight, responsible for raising 2 teenagers on my own. Those were the hardest years of my life. I took on extra work wherever I could find it, cleaning offices in the evenings after my day job, babysitting neighbors' children on weekends, even taking in sewing and alterations at home. My fingers were constantly pricked with needle holes. My back ached from hunching over that old sewing machine until 3 a.m, but I kept going. I had to keep going. My children needed me. Sarah was always the ambitious one. She earned good grades, participated in student government, dreamed of becoming a lawyer. When she got accepted to NYU, I was so proud I cried right there in the school counselor's office. But the tuition was astronomical, nearly $30,000 a year. My salary as a secretary barely covered our basic expenses, and I had already taken out loans to help pay for Robert's funeral. I went to 3 different banks before I found one willing to give me a personal loan for Sarah's education. The interest rate was crushing, but I signed the papers anyway. I took on a 3rd job, working weekends at a local diner, serving coffee and pancakes to construction workers and taxi drivers. My feet were constantly swollen, my hands cracked from washing dishes, but every time I sent another tuition payment, I felt like I was buying my daughter's future. Sarah graduated magna cum laude. At her graduation ceremony, she hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Mom, I'm going to make you so proud. I'm going to take care of you the way you've taken care of me." I believed her completely. Law school was even more expensive, another $40,000 a year. By then, Sarah was working part-time at a law firm, but it wasn't enough to cover her expenses. Once again, I found myself at the bank, signing loan papers, putting my modest apartment up as collateral. The loan officer looked at me with barely concealed pity as I explained my situation, but I held my chin up. This was an investment in my daughter's future, and by extension, in mine. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Patterson?" the loan officer asked, his pen hovering over the paperwork. "This is a significant financial commitment for someone in your position." "My daughter is going to be a successful lawyer," I replied firmly. "She'll pay it all back once she's established. She's a good girl." I worked 4 jobs during Sarah's law school years. The secretary position during the day, cleaning offices 3 evenings a week, weekend shifts at the diner, and taking in laundry for busy professionals in Manhattan. I took the subway into the city every Saturday morning, my arms full of dirty clothes, and spent the day in laundromats washing and ironing business shirts. My own clothes were faded and worn. My shoes had holes in the soles that I covered with cardboard, but I kept working. The money I saved from not eating lunch most days, from walking instead of taking the subway when the weather was decent, from never buying anything for myself unless it was absolutely necessary, all of it went into that savings account. $1 at a time, $5 here, $20 there, slowly building toward something that felt like security. When Sarah passed the bar exam, we celebrated at a tiny Italian restaurant in Little Italy. She ordered a bottle of wine, something I never would have splurged on, and raised her glass in a toast. "To my mom," she said, her eyes bright with success and possibility. "The strongest woman I know. I promise you, everything you've sacrificed for me is going to pay off. I'm going to take care of you now." Michael had taken a different path. After high school, he joined the military, served 2 tours overseas, and came home changed in ways I couldn't fully understand. He was quieter, more distant, struggled to hold down steady work. I helped him too, of course. Rent money when he was between jobs, groceries when his food stamps ran out, gas money when he needed to get to job interviews. Smaller amounts than what I had spent on Sarah's education, but still significant chunks of my carefully hoarded savings. "You're too generous, Mom," Sarah would say when she heard about me helping Michael. "He needs to learn to stand on his own feet." You can't keep bailing him out forever. But what was I supposed to do? Let my son be evicted? Let him go hungry? These were my children. The two people in the world I loved more than my own life. If I didn't help them, who would? Sarah got her first job at a prestigious law firm in Manhattan, starting at $90,000 a year. It seemed like a fortune to me, someone who had never earned more than $30,000 in any single year. She moved to a beautiful apartment on the Upper West Side, started wearing expensive suits, carrying designer handbags. When I visited her in her new space, I felt proud and overwhelmed at the same time. My little girl had made it. But instead of the financial help I had eventually hoped for, the requests for money continued. "Mom, I need help with the security deposit on a better apartment. This neighborhood is getting rough, and I need to be in a safer area for work." "Mom, I have to buy professional clothes for court appearances. It's an investment in my career." "Mom, my law school loans are killing me. Could you help with a few payments until I get my first bonus?" Each request seemed reasonable on its own, and each time, Sarah promised it would be the last time she needed help. "Once I make partner, I'll pay you back everything, Mom. With interest. You'll never have to worry about money again." I was 68 when I finally decided to stop working so many jobs. My arthritis was getting worse, my blood pressure was becoming a concern, and my doctor warned me that I was pushing my body beyond its limits. I kept the part-time position at the grocery store, partly for the small income, partly because I enjoyed the human interaction, but I gave up the evening cleaning jobs and the weekend diner work. For the first time in decades, I had time to think about my own life, my own needs, my own dreams. I began to imagine what I might do with the money I had saved. Maybe I could travel a little. I had always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, or take one of those bus tours through New England in the fall. Maybe I could take some art classes at the community center, something I had always been interested in but never had time for. Maybe I could even help with Emma's college fund. My granddaughter was already 10 years old and sharp as a tack, just like her mother had been at that age. The $100,000 in my savings account felt like possibility itself. It wasn't enough to live luxuriously, but it was enough to provide a cushion, a safety net, maybe even a little bit of joy in my remaining years. I had worked so hard for so long, sacrificed so much. Didn't I deserve a small reward for all that dedication? I should have known it was too good to be true. The signs had been there looking back. Sarah's visits became less frequent over the past year. Our phone calls, which used to happen several times a week, dwindled to once a month, then even less. When I tried to call her, she was always busy, always rushing to another meeting, another court appearance, another work emergency. "I'm sorry, Mom. I have to run. Big case coming up. I'll call you this weekend." But the weekend would come and go with no call. When I did see her, she seemed distracted, stressed, always checking her phone. The warm, affectionate daughter who used to curl up next to me on the couch and tell me about her day had been replaced by someone who seemed to view our visits as another obligation to check off her list. Emma, now 15, rarely came with her mother anymore. When I asked about my granddaughter, Sarah would give vague responses. "She's busy with school. You know how teenagers are. She's got her own life now." But I remembered being a teenager, and I remembered Sarah being a teenager. Yes, they're busy and self-absorbed, but they still need their families. They still need the unconditional love and support that only a grandmother can provide. I had so much love to give Emma, so many stories to share, so many lessons I had learned that I wanted to pass down to her. But increasingly, I was shut out of her life too. The isolation crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. Days would go by without meaningful human contact beyond the polite exchanges with customers at the grocery store. I would sit in my apartment in the evenings, watching the lights come on in the windows of the buildings across the street, wondering about the families inside. Were they having dinner together? Helping with homework? Sharing the small joys and frustrations of daily life? I tried to make connections with neighbors, but in New York, people keep to themselves. Mrs. Ramirez, the widow who lived 2 doors down, was friendly enough when we encountered each other in the hallway, but she had her own family, her own concerns. I didn't want to be the pathetic old lady who imposed herself on others because her own family had no time for her. The loneliness was made worse by the constant worry about money. Even with my savings, I knew that one serious illness or major home repair could wipe out everything I had worked so hard to accumulate. I lay awake at night sometimes, calculating and recalculating my monthly expenses, trying to figure out how to make my money last if I lived to be 80, 85, 90. The numbers never looked reassuring. Then came that phone call in February, the one that should have set off alarm bells but instead filled me with hope for the first time in months. "Mom, I have incredible news." Sarah's voice was more animated than I had heard it in ages. "I'm starting my own practice. Can you believe it? After all these years of working for other people, I'm finally going to be my own boss." I was genuinely excited for her. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." It's a big risk, of course. Starting costs are enormous: office rent, equipment, legal databases, insurance, marketing. But I've got several clients ready to follow me from my current firm. I'm confident I can make this work. "That's so brave of you, Sarah. Your father would have been so proud." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable than it had been in years. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know how hard this is for me. I've never wanted to be the kind of person who had to borrow money from family, but this is my one chance to build something really significant. Would you consider helping me with the startup costs? It would be a loan, of course, with interest. I'd have it paid back within 2 years. My heart swelled with emotion. This was it. This was the moment when all my years of sacrifice would finally pay off. Sarah was including me in her success, trusting me with her dreams, asking for my help to build something that would benefit both of us in the long run. "How much would you need?" I asked. "50,000 would be enough to get started properly." "I know it's a lot, Mom, but this business is going to be incredibly successful. I've already got contracts lined up worth 3 times that amount. You'd be investing your money, not just giving it away." $50,000 was exactly half of my life savings. But Sarah was right. It was an investment, not a gift. And even if something went wrong, I would still have $50,000 left as a safety net. More importantly, helping Sarah launch her own firm would hopefully mean that our relationship could return to what it had been when she was younger. She would need my advice, my support, my encouragement. I would be useful to her again, valuable in her life. "Of course I'll help you," I said without hesitation. "We're family. That's what family does." The relief in her voice was palpable. "Oh, Mom, thank you so much. I can't tell you what this means to me. I promise you won't regret this. I'm going to make you so proud, and I'm going to pay you back before you know it." "I'm already proud of you, sweetheart. I always have been." We made arrangements for me to transfer the money to her business account. Sarah came by the apartment that weekend to help me set up the online banking transfer, something I wasn't entirely comfortable doing on my own. She seemed more relaxed than she had in months, chatting about her business plans, even asking about my health and how I was spending my time. For those few hours, it felt like I had my daughter back. "This is just the beginning, Mom," she said as she kissed my cheek goodbye. "Once the firm is established, I'm going to be able to help you in ways I never could before. Maybe we can look into getting you a nicer apartment, somewhere with better amenities. Maybe even a doorman building with better security." I watched her walk down the hallway toward the elevator, her heels clicking confidently on the worn linoleum floor. She looked successful, purposeful, like a woman who knew exactly where she was going in life. I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of being needed, of being valuable to someone I loved. For the next few weeks, Sarah called regularly with updates on her progress. She had found the perfect office space in Midtown Manhattan. She was interviewing potential associates and support staff. She was meeting with clients and signing lucrative contracts. Each conversation reinforced my conviction that I had made the right decision in supporting her venture. Then, in mid-March, came another call. Sarah sounded stressed, apologetic, but also urgent. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but I need another $25,000. The office build-out is costing more than expected, and I need to hire 2 additional paralegals to handle the workload." I know this wasn't part of our original agreement, but this is actually a good problem to have. It means the business is taking off even faster than I projected. 25,000 more would bring me down to 25,000 total in savings, barely enough to cover a major medical emergency, let alone provide any real security. But Sarah sounded so confident, so close to success. And she had been keeping her promises about staying in touch, making me feel involved in her new venture. "I'm a little nervous about going down that low in my savings account," I admitted. "I completely understand, Mom. But look at it this way. Within 6 months, you'll have earned more in interest from my loan than you would have earned in 5 years, just letting that money sit in a savings account. And if you're ever in a financial emergency, you know I'll be able to help you immediately. This is going to work out so well for both of us." Her logic seemed sound. And the thought of earning actual interest on my money, something that had never been possible when I was living paycheck to paycheck, was appealing. More importantly, I trusted my daughter. Despite the distance that had grown between us over the past few years, deep down I believed that Sarah was a good person who would never intentionally hurt me. I authorized the second transfer. The calls became less frequent after that, but I assumed Sarah was just busy getting her new firm up and running. When I tried to reach her, I usually got her voicemail. She would call back eventually, but often several days later, and the conversations were brief. "How's the business going?" I would ask. "Great. Really good. Busy, you know? I'm working 18-hour days, but that's what it takes in the beginning. I should have some clients' payments coming in next month, and then I can start working on your repayment schedule." I wanted to believe her, but something in her voice didn't sound quite right. She seemed evasive, distracted, like she was reading from a script rather than talking naturally about her work. Then came the call in early April that I will never forget. "Mom, there's been a complication with one of my major clients. They're delaying payment on a big contract, which means my cash flow is tighter than expected. I need to access a little more funding to keep the firm operational while I wait for this payment to come through." My stomach dropped. "How much more?" "Another 25,000 would cover it. I know this is difficult, Mom, but it's just temporary. Once this client pays what they owe, I'll be able to start paying you back immediately, with a bonus for your patience." 25,000 more would completely wipe out my savings account. I would have nothing left, no safety net whatsoever. At 72 years old, starting over financially was not an option. "Sarah, I can't. That would be everything I have. If something happened to me, an illness or accident, I wouldn't have any way to handle it. Mom, nothing is going to happen to you. And if it did, I would take care of everything. You don't need to worry about money anymore. You have me. Your investment in my firm is your security now, much better security than some pathetic savings account earning basically no interest." The way she said pathetic savings account stung. That pathetic savings account represented 30 years of sacrifice, of eating generic cereal for dinner so I could put $5 more away, of walking in shoes with holes in the soles so I could avoid spending money on new ones. That account was my independence, my dignity, my proof that I had managed to create something of value despite all the obstacles life had thrown at me. "I need to think about this," I said. "Mom, I don't have time for you to think about it. This is a time-sensitive situation. The longer I wait, the worse it gets. You have to trust me on this. I'm your daughter. I would never put you at risk." Maybe it was the pressure in her voice, or the fear of losing her altogether if I refused to help, or just the habit of saying yes to my children's requests that had been ingrained in me for decades. Whatever the reason, I found myself agreeing to transfer the remaining $25,000. "You're making the right decision, Mom. I promise you won't regret this. I love you so much, and I'm going to make this up to you in ways you can't even imagine." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the transfer confirmation on my computer screen. My savings account balance, $0.00. Everything I had worked for, saved for, sacrificed for, gone. But it was going to a good cause, I told myself. I was investing in my daughter's future, which was also an investment in my own security. The next few weeks passed in an anxious blur. I found myself checking my phone constantly, hoping for updates from Sarah about how the business was progressing. When she didn't call, I called her, but increasingly my calls went straight to voicemail. When she did call back, she sounded hurried and stressed. "I can't talk long, Mom. Things are crazy here. But everything is moving in the right direction. You just need to be patient a little longer. When do you think you might be able to start paying me back?" "Soon. Maybe next month. I'll know more after I meet with my accountant." But next month came and went with no payment, no clear timeline, and very little communication. When I did manage to reach Sarah, she had excuses ready. A client was late with payment. The legal market was slower than expected. She needed to reinvest all profits back into growing the business. By early June, I was beginning to panic. My part-time job at the grocery store barely covered my rent and utilities. I had no money for food beyond the basics: bread, peanut butter, canned soup. I had applied for food stamps, which helped, but the limited selection and small quantities meant I was often hungry by the end of the month. More importantly, I felt completely vulnerable. If my refrigerator broke down, if I needed dental work, if the subway fare increased, I had no way to handle even minor unexpected expenses. The security I had built up over 3 decades was completely gone, and I was entirely dependent on the promises of a daughter who seemed increasingly reluctant to talk to me. That's when I discovered the truth. On a sweltering Thursday afternoon in late June, I was walking home from the grocery store with a bag containing a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a can of tomato soup. Basically everything I could afford until my next paycheck. The bag broke as I was crossing Northern Boulevard, and my groceries scattered across the sidewalk. As I was scrambling to collect them, a well-dressed woman approached me. "Excuse me, aren't you Mrs. Patterson? Sarah Patterson's mother?" I looked up, shading my eyes against the sun. "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" "I'm Jennifer Walsh. Sarah and I went to law school together, and we worked at the same firm until recently. I heard she started her own practice." "Yes, she's doing very well," I said automatically, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were true. Jennifer's expression became awkward, sympathetic. "Mrs. Patterson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is Sarah actually running her own firm? Because I heard through the legal community that she was let go from Morrison & Associates back in February. There were some issues with client billing irregularities." The summer heat suddenly felt suffocating. "What do you mean?" "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Sarah was terminated for falsifying billable hours and misappropriating client funds. It was a pretty big scandal. She'll likely face disciplinary action from the State Bar Association. I just assumed you knew." I felt like I was falling, even though I was standing still on solid concrete. She told me she was starting her own firm. She needed money for startup costs. Jennifer's face went pale. "Oh, no," Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry. There's no law firm. Sarah hasn't been practicing law anywhere since February. I have no idea what she's been doing for money, but running her own firm, isn't it? The rest of the conversation was a blur. Jennifer offered to help me gather my scattered groceries, gave me her business card, told me to call if I needed anything. But I could barely process what she was saying. My mind was reeling with the implications of what I had just learned. Sarah had lied to me. Not just a small lie, but a massive, elaborate deception that had cost me my entire life savings. She had looked me in the eye and described fictional business meetings, fictional clients, fictional success, all while taking every penny I had worked so hard to save. And for what? What had she really done with my $100,000? I walked the remaining 6 blocks to my apartment in a daze, clutching my groceries and trying to make sense of this new reality. By the time I reached my building, I was shaking with a combination of rage, hurt, and absolute terror about my financial situation. My apartment felt different when I walked in. Smaller, shabbier, more prison-like than ever before. I set my groceries on the kitchen counter and stared around at the space that had been my home for more than 20 years. The furniture was worn and mismatched, the carpet was stained, the paint was peeling in several places. I had always told myself that these things didn't matter because I was building financial security for my future. But now I had neither a comfortable home nor financial security. I had nothing. I tried calling Sarah immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, same result. I sent text messages asking her to call me urgently. No response. That evening, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything but the devastating realization that my own daughter had stolen from me. Not borrowed, not made a risky investment. Stolen. She had deliberately deceived me in order to take money she had no intention of repaying. The next morning, I called Sarah's phone every hour on the hour. Finally, around noon, she picked up. "Hi, Mom. Sorry I missed your calls. I've been in meetings all morning. Sarah, we need to talk immediately. I found out about your job situation." There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more defensive. "What are you talking about? I know you were fired from Morrison & Associates. I know there is no law firm. I know you lied to me about everything." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Mom, it's complicated. Yes, I had some trouble at Morrison, but I'm working on getting that resolved. And I am planning to start my own firm, just as soon as I clear up this temporary situation." "Where is my money, Sarah?" "Your money is invested in my future business. Once I get back on my feet professionally, you'll get every penny back, just like I promised." "That's not good enough. I want my money back now. I need my money back now." Sarah's voice turned cold in a way I had never heard before. "Mom, that's not how investments work. You can't just demand your money back immediately because you're having second thoughts. I told you this was a business loan, not a gift. Business loans have terms and timelines. You lied to me about having a business. I have plans for a business. That's what startup funding is for, to turn plans into reality." I felt like I was talking to a stranger. Where was the warm, loving daughter I had raised? Where was the young woman who used to hug me and promise to take care of me when I got older? This person on the phone sounded like a con artist who had studied my daughter's voice and mannerisms. "Sarah, I need that money. I have no savings left. If something happens to me, I have no way to handle it." "Nothing is going to happen to you, Mom. You're being dramatic. And even if something did happen, you have family to help you. You have me and Michael. You don't need to hoard money like some kind of Depression-era survivalist." Hoard money? I had given her everything I had and she was accusing me of hoarding? "I want my money back by the end of the month." Sarah laughed, actually laughed. "That's not going to happen, Mom. I don't have $100,000 just sitting around. You're going to have to be patient while I rebuild my career. I'm doing the best I can. Then give me whatever you can. Give me 50,000. Give me 25,000. Give me something. I don't have anything to give you right now. I'm living paycheck to paycheck myself. Do you think I'm not stressed about this situation too? Living paycheck to paycheck on what income? She had told me she wasn't working, but I was too emotionally overwhelmed to catch the inconsistency in her story. Sarah, please, I'm begging you. I worked my whole life for that money. I sacrificed everything to give you and Michael opportunities I never had. I can't survive without some financial security. Oh, here we go with the guilt trip. I worked my whole life. I sacrificed everything. Mom, that was your choice. No one asked you to work 4 jobs to put me through school. No one asked you to live like a monk so you could save money. You made those decisions because they made you feel like a martyr. Don't put that on me now. I felt like she had physically slapped me. How can you say that to me? Because it's the truth, Mom. You've always used your sacrifices as a way to manipulate people, to make them feel guilty for having their own lives and their own needs. Well, I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm an adult. I'm dealing with my own problems, and I can't be responsible for managing your anxiety about money. The conversation ended with Sarah hanging up on me. I sat in my kitchen for hours afterward, staring at the phone in my hand and trying to process what had just happened. My daughter, the person I loved more than anyone else in the world, had not only stolen my life savings, but was now treating me like I was the problem for wanting it back. Over the next few days, I tried to reach out to other family members for support or advice. Michael was sympathetic, but not particularly helpful. His own finances were precarious, and he was dealing with his own relationship problems. He offered to lend me a few $100s, which I appreciated, but which wouldn't solve the fundamental problem of having no savings. I always thought Sarah was a little self-centered, he said during one of our phone conversations. But I never thought she would do something like this to you. Have you thought about talking to a lawyer? I had thought about it, but lawyers cost money I didn't have. And what would be the point? Even if I could prove that Sarah had defrauded me, she clearly didn't have the money to pay me back. I would just be throwing good money after bad, and I would probably destroy any remaining chance of salvaging my relationship with her. The isolation became overwhelming. Sarah, who had been my primary connection to family life for so many years, was now avoiding my calls entirely. Emma, my granddaughter, had no idea what was happening between her mother and me, and I didn't want to burden a teenager with adult problems. My few friends were acquaintances rather than close confidants, and I was too embarrassed to admit how thoroughly I had been taken advantage of. I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night calculating how long my grocery store income would last if I had a medical emergency, or if my rent increased, or if the subway system raised its fares. The numbers were always terrifying. I had worked so hard for so long to avoid being the kind of elderly person who became a burden on others, and now that nightmare scenario seemed inevitable. The depression crept in gradually, then seemed to accelerate. Getting out of bed became difficult. Showering felt like an enormous effort. I stopped caring about my appearance, my apartment, my few remaining friendships. What was the point of maintaining these things when my future looked so bleak? By August, I was barely functioning. I went to work at the grocery store because I had no choice. The small paycheck was all that stood between me and complete destitution. But outside of those necessary hours, I spent most of my time sitting in my apartment, replaying the conversations with Sarah, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. Had I been too trusting? Too naive? Too desperate for my daughter's affection? All of the above, probably. But what was the alternative? Should I have been suspicious of my own child, interrogated her about her business plans, demanded proof of her claims? What kind of mother does that? The worst part was the complete destruction of my faith in my own judgment. If I could be so thoroughly deceived by someone I thought I knew better than anyone, how could I ever trust anyone again? If my own daughter could look me in the eye and lie to me repeatedly while taking everything I had, what hope was there for any meaningful relationships in my remaining years? September brought an unexpected and devastating blow. I received a call from Sarah in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I hadn't heard from her in over a month, and I was so surprised to see her name on my caller ID that I answered without thinking. "Mom, I need you to know something before you hear it from someone else. I've been arrested." My heart stopped. "What? For what?" "Financial fraud, related to some issues at my old firm. It's all a misunderstanding, but my lawyer says I need to be prepared for this to go to trial. I wanted you to know in case someone calls you about it." "Oh, Sarah." "Sweetheart, what happened?" For a moment, she sounded like my little girl again, scared, vulnerable, needing her mother's comfort. "I made some mistakes, Mom. Some accounting errors that got blown out of proportion. But the prosecution is trying to make it sound much worse than it was. They're claiming I deliberately stole money from clients, which is absolutely not true." I wanted to believe her. Despite everything that had happened between us, despite her lies about the law firm and her callous dismissal of my financial needs, some part of me still wanted to believe that my daughter was fundamentally a good person who had simply made some poor choices. "Do you need me to do anything? Can I help somehow?" "Actually, yes. My lawyer is really expensive, and I need to pay him a large retainer to make sure I have the best possible representation. I was wondering if you could help me with that." The audacity was breathtaking. After taking my entire life savings under false pretenses, she was asking for more money. "Sarah, I don't have any money to give you. You took everything I had." "I know, Mom, but this is an emergency. If I don't have good legal representation, I could go to prison. Isn't my freedom worth something to you?" "Of course your freedom is important to me, but I literally have nothing left to give you." "You made sure of that. Don't be so dramatic. You have your apartment, you have your job, you have family who care about you. You're not exactly destitute." "Not exactly destitute." This from a woman who had taken every penny of my life savings and was now facing fraud charges herself. "I can't help you, Sarah. I'm sorry, but I just can't." "Fine. I guess I know where I stand with my own mother. When I needed you most, you abandoned me." She hung up, and I realized that in her mind, I was somehow the villain in this story. I was the one who had failed her, not the other way around. The psychological manipulation was so complete and so twisted that it made me question my own sanity. October was the lowest point. The criminal charges against Sarah became public knowledge, reported in the legal newspapers, and even briefly mentioned in the local news. Suddenly, people in my neighborhood started looking at me with sympathy or curiosity or barely concealed judgment. My daughter, the successful lawyer I had been so proud of for so many years, was now known as a criminal defendant. More painfully, the details that emerged during the pretrial hearings revealed the extent of Sarah's deception. She had been stealing from clients for over 2 years, using elaborate fake billing schemes to cover her tracks. The money hadn't gone to business investments or even personal luxuries. It had gone to gambling debts. My daughter had a severe gambling addiction that she had hidden from everyone, including me. The $100,000 I had given her hadn't been startup funding for a law firm. It had gone directly to bookmakers and casinos in Atlantic City and Las Vegas. Every penny I had saved over 30 years of backbreaking work had been fed into slot machines and poker games. Learning about the gambling addiction actually made me feel worse, not better. It meant that Sarah was sick, not just selfish. It meant that she needed help, not condemnation. But it also meant that my money was gone forever, lost in ways that made recovery even more impossible than I had imagined. I tried to reach out to her after learning about the addiction, but she refused to take my calls. According to Michael, she was staying with friends and trying to find a new lawyer who would work with her on a payment plan. She had made it clear that she didn't want contact with any family members who weren't prepared to offer financial assistance. The irony was crushing. My daughter needed help, real help, but the very actions that had created her current crisis had made it impossible for me to provide that help. I wanted to support her through recovery, through legal proceedings, through whatever consequences she would face. But I was now in such a precarious financial position that I couldn't even afford to visit her if she had been willing to see me. The holidays were approaching, and for the first time in my adult life, I had no family plans. Sarah was avoiding me, Michael was dealing with his own problems, and Emma was caught in the middle of her mother's crisis. I would be spending Thanksgiving and Christmas alone in my apartment, eating grocery store prepared foods because I couldn't afford to host a meal or travel to be with anyone else. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was lying in bed one November morning, staring at the ceiling and trying to find the motivation to get up and go to work, when I remembered something I had forgotten years ago. When my husband Robert died, his life insurance policy had paid out $50,000. I had used most of that money to cover funeral expenses and to help pay down some of our existing debts, but I had put $10,000 into a safety deposit box at a different bank, Chase, rather than the credit union where I kept my regular checking and savings accounts. At the time, it had seemed like a smart precaution. If anything ever happened to my regular accounts, I would have this emergency fund hidden away. Over the years, I had occasionally added small amounts to the safety deposit box, $100 here, $50 there, whenever I had managed to save a little extra and wanted to put it somewhere completely secure. I hadn't thought about that money in years. It had been such a small amount compared to my regular savings account that I had essentially forgotten it existed. But now, lying in my bed and facing complete destitution, I realized that this forgotten stash might be my salvation. I got dressed and took the subway to the Chase Bank branch in downtown Flushing. My hands were shaking as I handed over my identification and the key to the safety deposit box. It had been so long since I had accessed it that I wasn't even sure what I would find inside. The bank employee led me to the vault and left me alone with the metal box. Inside, I found not just the money I remembered putting there, but documentation of something I had completely forgotten, a small investment account that Robert had set up shortly before he died. He had invested $2,000 in some kind of mutual fund, intending it as a long-term college fund for the children. After his death, I had been so overwhelmed with immediate financial needs that I had forgotten about the investment entirely. The paperwork had been stored in the safety deposit box along with the cash. According to the most recent statement in the box, that $2,000 investment had grown to over $45,000 over the past 27 years. Combined with the cash I had stashed away, I had nearly $60,000 that Sarah didn't even know existed. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't the $100,000 I had lost, but it was enough to provide some genuine security, to know that I could handle medical emergencies or other unexpected expenses without becoming completely dependent on others. More importantly, it was money that belonged entirely to me. Sarah had never known about the safety deposit box or the investment account. She had taken everything she knew about, but this final resource was beyond her reach. The psychological impact of discovering this forgotten wealth was profound. For the first time since learning about Sarah's deception, I felt like I had some control over my own life. I wasn't completely at the mercy of a daughter who had proven herself to be unreliable and manipulative. I had options, resources, the ability to make choices based on my own needs rather than someone else's demands. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I woke up the next morning with more energy than I had felt since the whole crisis began. I made myself a good breakfast, eggs and bacon instead of my usual slice of bread, and started thinking about how I wanted to move forward with my life. The first decision was easy. Sarah would never know about this money. She had proven that she couldn't be trusted with financial information, and I had no intention of exposing my remaining security to her potentially predatory behavior. If she ever asked about additional resources, I would honestly tell her that I had nothing more to give. The second decision was more complicated: what to do about our relationship. I still loved my daughter, despite everything that had happened. I still wanted her to get help for her gambling addiction and to find a way forward after her legal troubles were resolved. But I also knew that I couldn't continue to enable her destructive behavior or to expose myself to further financial exploitation. Over the next few weeks, I began to set boundaries that I had never enforced before. When Sarah finally called in early December, asking for money to help with her legal expenses, I told her calmly that I had no money to give her. "Mom, you have to help me. I'm your daughter. If I go to prison, you'll regret not doing everything you could to prevent it." "Sarah, I've already done everything I can for you. I gave you my entire life savings and you spent it on gambling. I can't help you anymore. You're being selfish. You're choosing money over your own daughter's freedom. I'm choosing to protect myself from further manipulation. I love you, but I can't allow you to destroy my financial security any more than you already have." It was the first time in my life that I had spoken to Sarah with complete honesty, without trying to soften the blow or protect her feelings. The conversation didn't end well. She accused me of abandoning her and hung up angrily, but I felt strong in a way I hadn't felt in years. Christmas came and went quietly. I spent the day alone, but by choice rather than by circumstance. Michael had invited me to join his family, but I declined. I wanted to use the holiday as an opportunity to think about what I wanted my life to look like going forward, without the pressure of trying to maintain family relationships that weren't serving me well. I used some of my rediscovered money to make small improvements to my apartment. New curtains, a comfortable reading chair, a few pieces of art for the walls. Nothing extravagant, but enough to make the space feel more like a home and less like a temporary shelter. For the first time in decades, I was spending money on myself without guilt or anxiety. I also made an appointment with a financial advisor to discuss how to manage my remaining resources more wisely. The advisor was impressed that I had managed to save as much as I had on such a limited income, and she helped me develop a budget that would allow me to live comfortably while preserving some money for genuine emergencies. "You should be proud of yourself," she told me. Most people in your situation would have been completely devastated by this kind of financial betrayal. The fact that you had the foresight to keep some resources separate shows real wisdom. I had never thought of myself as wise, but maybe she was right. Maybe my instinct to hide away that emergency money had been smarter than I realized at the time. January brought news about Sarah's legal case. She had accepted a plea bargain that would result in 2 years of probation and a requirement to pay restitution to her former clients. She wouldn't go to prison, but she would also be disbarred and unable to practice law. Her career, the career I had sacrificed so much to make possible, was over. I felt sad for her, but not responsible. Her choices had led to these consequences, and while I wished things could have been different, I no longer felt obligated to rescue her from the results of her own actions. Michael called to update me on the situation and to see how I was coping with everything. "I have to admit, Mom, I'm proud of how you've handled all this. I know it couldn't have been easy to stand up to Sarah the way you did. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She asked me to try to convince you to help her with money for a gambling addiction treatment program. I told her that you'd already done enough and that she needed to find other resources. Thank you for that. I hope she gets the help she needs, but she's going to have to find a way to pay for it herself. I think you're right. Maybe if she has to take responsibility for solving her own problems, she'll be more invested in actually getting better." It was a relief to know that at least one of my children understood the position I was in and supported the boundaries I was trying to set. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a sense of renewal that I hadn't expected to feel again. I started taking walks in Flushing Meadows Park, something I hadn't done in years because I had always been too busy working multiple jobs. The cherry trees were blooming, and the sight of all that beauty made me realize how much of life I had missed while I was focused entirely on earning and saving money. I enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the local community center. It was something I had always been interested in but had never had time to pursue. The teacher, a retired art professor named Mrs. Chen, was patient and encouraging. The other students were mostly women around my age, and several of them became genuine friends, the first real friendships I had formed in years. "You have a natural eye for color," Mrs. Chen told me after I had been attending classes for a few months. "Have you ever thought about entering some of your work in local art shows?" The suggestion seemed ridiculous at first. I was a beginner, a 73-year-old woman who had started painting as a hobby. Who would be interested in my amateur watercolors? But Mrs. Chen was persistent, and eventually I agreed to submit a painting of the cherry blossoms in the park to a community art show. To my amazement, the painting sold. A young couple who had just moved to the neighborhood bought it for their apartment, telling me that it captured exactly how they felt about discovering the beauty of Flushing in the springtime. They paid me $50 for it, not a life-changing amount of money, but enough to make me feel like maybe I had something valuable to offer the world beyond my capacity to sacrifice for others. That summer, I took my first real vacation in over 20 years. Nothing elaborate, just a week at a bed and breakfast in Vermont, where I spent my days painting landscapes and my evenings reading books I had always meant to get to. The trip cost me just over $1,000, money that the old me would never have been willing to spend on something so frivolous. But the new me, the me who had learned that financial security meant nothing if I never enjoyed any of the benefits, found the expense entirely justified. I sent a few postcards to family members, including one to Sarah at her last known address. I kept the message neutral, just a simple, "Thinking of you, love Mom." I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one, but it felt important to let her know that I hadn't written her off entirely. The transformation in my daily life was remarkable. Instead of waking up each morning with anxiety about money, I woke up thinking about what I wanted to accomplish that day. My part-time job at the grocery store became something I did by choice rather than necessity. The income was helpful, but I no longer needed it to survive. More importantly, I discovered that I genuinely enjoyed the work and the interactions with customers. Without the crushing financial pressure that had defined my working life for so many years, I could appreciate the social aspects of the job. Regular customers started recognizing me and asking about my paintings. Some of them even commissioned small works for their homes. In August, exactly 1 year after Sarah's arrest had become public knowledge, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Emma, my granddaughter, now 16 years old. "Grandma, it's Emma. I hope it's okay that I called you." My heart leaped. I hadn't heard from Emma since the crisis with Sarah began. "Of course it's okay, sweetheart. I'm so happy to hear your voice. How are you doing?" "I'm okay, I guess. Mom told me that you two aren't really talking anymore because of money stuff, but she didn't explain what happened. I just know that she's been really stressed and sad for the past year, and I miss seeing you." I was torn between wanting to protect Emma from the ugly details of her mother's behavior and wanting to be honest about why I had distanced myself from the family. I settled on a middle ground. "Your mom made some choices that hurt me very badly, Emma. I still love her, and I hope things will get better between us eventually. But right now I need to protect myself by keeping some distance. Is there anything I can do to help? I hate that our family is all broken up like this." "You're not responsible for fixing the problems between adults, sweetie. The best thing you can do is focus on school and taking care of yourself. But I'm so glad you called. I've missed you terribly." "I've missed you too, Grandma. Would it be okay if I came to visit you sometime? Just me, not Mom. I could take the subway." The thought of seeing Emma again filled me with joy. I would love that more than anything. We could go to the art museum or I could show you some of my paintings. You're painting now? That's so cool. Mom mentioned something about that, but I didn't realize you were serious about it. We made plans for Emma to visit the following Saturday. I spent the rest of the week preparing, buying ingredients for her favorite cookies, cleaning the apartment until it sparkled, choosing which paintings I wanted to show her. Emma's visit was everything I had hoped it would be. She was 16 now, no longer the child I remembered, but she still had the same quick wit and generous heart that had made her such a joy to be around when she was younger. She was genuinely interested in my artwork, asked thoughtful questions about my techniques, and even requested that I teach her some basic watercolor skills. Grandma, I have to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Did Mom steal money from you? I had been dreading this question, but Emma deserved the truth. Yes, she did. I thought so. She's been taking money from my college savings account too. Dad doesn't know yet, but I found out when I tried to check my balance online. There's almost nothing left. My heart broke for Emma, but I also felt proud of her maturity and intelligence in recognizing what was happening. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Your mom is sick. She has a gambling addiction that makes her do things she wouldn't normally do. I know about the gambling. I've known for a while. I just didn't realize she would steal from family to pay for it. Addiction changes people in ways that are very hard to understand. It doesn't mean your mom doesn't love you, but it does mean that she's not able to make good decisions right now. Are you going to be okay? Financially, I mean? I smiled at her concern. Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to be fine. I'm learning to take better care of myself, and I'm discovering that I don't need as much money as I thought I did to be happy. Good. I was worried about you. And Grandma? I'm proud of you for standing up to Mom. I know that must have been really hard. The rest of Emma's visit was purely enjoyable. We painted together, looked through old photo albums, talked about her plans for college and her dreams for the future. When it was time for her to leave, she hugged me tightly and promised to call regularly. I love you, Grandma, and I'm not going to let Mom's problems mess up our relationship. I love you too, Emma. So much. After she left, I realized that her visit had given me something I hadn't expected to find again. Hope for the future of our family. Even if my relationship with Sarah never recovered, I still had a meaningful connection with Emma. The circle of love and support that I thought had been completely broken was still intact, just smaller and different than it had been before. That fall, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. I quit my job at the grocery store. Not because I was angry or frustrated, but because I wanted to devote more time to painting and to building new relationships with people who shared my interests. The income from selling my artwork wasn't large, but combined with Social Security and the careful management of my remaining savings, it was enough to support a modest but comfortable lifestyle. More importantly, it made me feel valuable in an entirely different way than I had ever experienced before. Instead of being valuable because of what I could give to others, money, labor, sacrifice, I was valuable because of what I could create. People bought my paintings not out of obligation or guilt, but because they genuinely enjoyed them. The validation was pure and honest in a way that family relationships had never been. I also started volunteering at a local senior center, helping other elderly people who were struggling with financial exploitation by family members. It turned out to be a much more common problem than I had realized. Story after story of children and grandchildren who took advantage of trusting elderly parents, draining savings accounts, running up credit card debt, taking out loans in their names. The hardest part is the betrayal, one woman told me during a support group meeting. I could handle being poor if I had to, but knowing that my own son cared so little about my well-being that he would steal from me, that's what I can't get over. I understood her pain completely, but I also had something to offer her that many of the other support group members couldn't. Proof that it was possible to rebuild after that kind of betrayal. Evidence that setting boundaries with exploitative family members, while painful, could ultimately lead to a better quality of life. It takes time, I told her, and it takes courage. But you can choose to stop being a victim. You can choose to protect yourself and build a life based on your own values, rather than other people's demands. My role as a support group facilitator became one of the most meaningful aspects of my new life. Helping other people recognize their worth, develop strategies for self-protection, and find ways to rebuild their confidence and resources gave me a sense of purpose that went far beyond anything I had experienced during my years of single-minded focus on saving money. Winter arrived with news that Sarah had completed her probation successfully and was working as a paralegal at a small firm that specialized in helping people with financial problems. According to Michael, she was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings and seemed to be taking her recovery seriously. "She asks about you sometimes," he told me during one of our regular phone calls. "I think she wants to reach out, but she's ashamed of what she did." "She should be ashamed," I replied, but without the anger that would have accompanied those words a year earlier. Maybe shame is what she needs to feel in order to make better choices going forward. "Would you be open to talking to her if she called?" I considered the question carefully. Someday, maybe. But she would need to start by acknowledging what she did and apologizing sincerely. No excuses, no explanations, no attempts to minimize the impact. Just a genuine apology and a commitment to never ask me for money again. I think she's almost ready for that conversation. When she is, I'll listen. Spring returned, and with it came my second year of painting classes. My skills had improved dramatically, and Mrs. Chen suggested that I apply for membership in a local artists' cooperative. The application process was competitive, but 3 of my paintings were selected for inclusion in their annual show. The opening reception was held on a beautiful May evening. I wore a new dress, nothing expensive, but something colorful and flattering that made me feel confident and attractive. As I stood in the gallery space watching people examine my work and listening to their positive comments, I felt a satisfaction that was entirely different from anything I had experienced in my previous 73 years of life. "Excuse me, are you the artist who painted these landscapes?" I turned to see a well-dressed woman in her 50s examining my painting of the cherry blossoms in Flushing Meadows Park. "Yes, I am." "They're lovely. You've captured something very special about this area." "I'm actually a curator at the Queen's Museum, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in participating in a show we're planning about artists who found their calling later in life." The conversation that followed led to opportunities I could never have imagined. The Queen's Museum show was scheduled for the following year, and they wanted to feature 5 of my paintings. More importantly, the curator introduced me to other late-blooming artists, and I discovered a whole community of people who had reinvented themselves after age 60. "It's never too late to become who you were meant to be," one of them told me. Sometimes it just takes a major life crisis to give you the courage to try. As I walked home from the reception that night, I reflected on how true those words were. Losing my life savings to Sarah's gambling addiction had been devastating, but it had also freed me from a life built entirely around financial security and family obligations. In losing everything I thought I needed to be happy, I had discovered what actually made me happy: creativity, friendship, helping others, and the simple pleasure of living according to my own values rather than other people's expectations. The final piece of my transformation came in early June. I was working in my apartment one morning, painting a scene of the East River from memory, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's name. I stared at the phone for several rings, trying to decide whether to answer. Part of me wasn't ready for this conversation, but a larger part realized that I was as ready as I would ever be. "Hello, Sarah." "Mom? Thank you for answering. I wasn't sure you would." Her voice sounded different, softer, more tentative than I remembered. "What can I do for you?" "I need to apologize to you, a real apology, not the kind of half-hearted excuses I've given you before." "I stole your money, Mom. I lied to you repeatedly and deliberately. I took advantage of your trust and your love, and I used your financial needs to manipulate you into giving me more than you could afford to lose. I was quiet, letting her continue. I know that what I did was unforgivable. I know that I hurt you in ways that go far beyond the money. I betrayed your faith in me, and I destroyed the relationship we had built over so many years. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry. It was the apology I had been waiting for, and it was more complete and honest than I had dared to hope for. Thank you for saying that, Sarah. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge the reality of what happened. I'm in therapy now, in addition to the Gamblers Anonymous meetings. I'm learning about how addiction affected my thinking and my behavior, but I'm also learning that addiction doesn't excuse what I did. I made choices that hurt people I love, and I have to live with the consequences of those choices. How are you doing financially? I'm managing. I make a lot less money as a paralegal than I did as a lawyer, but I'm living within my means and I haven't gambled in over a year. I'm slowly paying back some of the people I owe money to, but I know it's going to take a long time to make things right. What about Emma's college fund? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I took money from that too. Emma told me she had talked to you about it. I'm working with her father to contribute what I can to rebuild it, but she's probably going to have to take out student loans for college. Another way I failed as a parent. Emma is a smart, strong young woman. She'll find a way to get the education she wants, with or without our help. I know, she gets that strength from you. We talked for another few minutes, carefully avoiding any discussion of future financial support or requests for assistance. Sarah didn't ask for money, and I didn't offer any. But the conversation felt like the beginning of a possible reconciliation, even if it would take years to rebuild the trust that had been destroyed. After we hung up, I sat quietly in my apartment, processing the emotions that the call had stirred up. I felt sad for the years of relationship that had been lost, proud of Sarah for finally taking responsibility for her actions, and grateful for the journey that had led me to this place of independence and self-respect. I looked around my apartment, taking in the paintings on the walls, the comfortable furniture I had chosen for myself, the plants that were thriving in the sunny windows. This space felt like home, in a way it never had when I was living in constant financial anxiety. The security I had now wasn't based on money in the bank, though I was grateful to have some. It was based on knowing that I could take care of myself, that I had value beyond what I could give to others, and that I could survive even the most devastating betrayal. That evening, I called Emma to let her know that her mother and I had talked. How do you feel about it, Grandma? Hopeful, I think. It's going to take time to rebuild trust, but at least now we're starting from a place of honesty. I'm glad. I love both of you, and I want our family to heal. We're going to be okay, Emma. All of us. It might not look like the family we used to be, but we're going to find a way to love each other without anyone having to sacrifice their own well-being. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that this had been the happiest year of my adult life. Not because bad things hadn't happened, they had. Not because all my problems had been solved, they hadn't. But because for the first time, I was living according to my own priorities and values, rather than just responding to other people's needs and demands. I had learned that love couldn't be purchased, that respect had to be earned, and that my own well-being was just as important as anyone else's. These lessons had come at a steep price, but they had been worth every penny I had lost. Now, as I sit here sharing this story with you, I want you to know that if any part of my experience sounds familiar, you're not alone. Financial exploitation by family members is heartbreakingly common, especially among older adults who have spent their lives prioritizing their children's needs over their own security. If someone you love has taken advantage of your trust, manipulated your emotions, or demanded more than you can afford to give, please know that you have the right to protect yourself. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Keeping some resources for your own needs isn't greedy, it's wise. And expecting to be treated with respect and honesty isn't asking too much. It's the bare minimum you deserve. Recovery is possible, even when the betrayal comes from the people closest to you. It takes time, it takes courage, and it often requires building entirely new definitions of family and security. But on the other side of that difficult journey, there can be a life that's richer and more authentic than anything you experienced before. Have you ever lived through something similar to what I've shared today? Have you had to make the painful choice between enabling someone you love and protecting yourself? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If my journey has touched your heart or given you hope for your own situation, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. There are so many of us who have walked this difficult path, and the more we share our experiences, the less alone we all feel. Thank you for listening and for giving me the courage to open my heart